instead of bigger fuselage. And of course, most noticeably, it's got that huge radome up on top. They would be launched off the carrier and fly out 100, 200 miles away from the task force and just go into wide orbit out there, and they could pretty much protect that whole quadrant of the air or surface from any inbound threat. So again, the Red Cross airplane behind us was the C-97. Ahead of us is a KC, let's see, I probably went too far. I know, somebody can maybe see up underneath the tail. This is a KC-97. Prefix K means a tanker. Look up underneath the tail and had to bend down, maybe see underneath the wing. There's the boom you can see laying up underneath the tail of the airplane. When they get ready to in-flight refuel, that boom could be lowered down at about a 45-degree angle below the horizon. There's a boom operator in the tail of the airplane. He controls that boom up and down, side to side, by controlling little winglets on the tip. And you'll see, I'll give you a better view of a refueling boom in just a minute. But anyway, that's the boom they insert in the receptacle, like I pointed out on top of that one tanker. So this was one of the early tankers the Air Force used. The airplane itself probably wasn't too bad an airplane, but it was really a slow, lumbering old aircraft. It really had a hard time keeping the jet fighters in position behind it, because when they get slowed down, they kind of wallow around quite a bit. So it really wasn't too successful as a tanker, but it was one of the ones they developed whole procedures with. So that's the KC-97 built by Boeing. The next generation of tankers, well, one of the next generation, is this next airplane straight ahead. I'll turn here in just a minute to get a better look at it. This is the KB-50, which is derived from the B-50 bomber. But this does not have a boom up underneath the tail. Notice out towards each wingtip there's kind of an egg-shaped pod hanging underneath there. It's basically the same pod built actually in the tail cone of the aircraft also. Each of those pods has a retractable hose that's, I don't know, might be 40 feet long, I'm not sure exact length on it. At the end of that hose is an oversized badminton shuttlecock basket. And the receiving airplanes that have the probe on the front of them fly up and insert the probe into that basket, add a little bit of power until it couples up, and you get a green light from the onboard the store, and you know you're ready to start receiving fuel. This aircraft type could actually refuel 3 fighters simultaneously from the 3 different probes it had on board, and it has a jet engine hung under each wing also, so they could be a little bit faster than the KC-97 we just talked about. So it helped with the speed differential, but it was still a pretty slow aircraft, and we just one of the kind of interim type tankers. Then the next generation of tankers, which was a very successful type, is right ahead of us here on the left. This is the KC-135 tanker built by Boeing. Basically, people say, well, this is what an aircraft that was derived from the 707 airliner. Well, it's just the opposite. This type of airplane was built first, and then later the 707 airliner was designed after the same airframe. But you get a really good view of the boom up underneath the tail of this airplane. Again, it's retracted now, but the boom operator's inside a pod that's right underneath the belly airplane, and he controls that pre-flight refueling. But I do always want to point out on this airplane too, up on top, you notice all the antennas and bulges and wires. It's just a lot going on up there. Well, in addition to being used as a tanker, this is one of the KC-135s that we used for Operation Looking Glass. That was back during the bad days of the Cold War. There was a period of over 30 years when there was always, I mean always, at least one of these airplanes airborne with a general on board, and they had all the launch codes for the U.S. nuclear arsenal. Had the Soviets taken out the president in a peremptory strike, we could have ordered a counterstrike from on board the Looking Glass airplane. Back to the right, I talked about the stoop with a roof. Then this thing with all the propeller blades on it, it's sort of the British equivalent, if you will. This is the Ferry Gannet. It's a Royal Navy carrier-based airborne early warning airplane. It's got the big radar underneath rather than up on top. When I was in the Navy, we actually had a joint operation one time with one of the British carriers, and they had a squadron of those on board. They controlled us on intercept missions, and it was a very good airplane. We did a real good job of controlling. It's just a totally different configuration. It's never been what I call a pretty airplane. It certainly doesn't get my vote for the prettiest one here. As we look at that, there's 2 propellers on the aircraft. They're counter-rotating. There's actually 2 engines also driving those 2 propellers, so it's a different configuration than you typically find. And still on the right side, number 810 is a Navy Marine Corps aircraft, the Douglas EA-1 Skyraider. The original Skyraider was a single-seat ground attack aircraft. Later, they modified some